So we're going to actually continue with income streams, and now we're going to talk about electronic transmissions, an area that probably excites you the most because it's kind of the most current and what's going on in the news, okay? So the first thing we need to understand is that electronic transmissions are not necessarily a type of income, but they are a source of income that encompasses all of the four groups that we've been talking about: mechanical royalties, performance royalties, synchronization royalties, and print royalties, only when these things are used in the digital space, okay? So let's break it down for you really quick, all right? Number one, downloads, right? There is a reproduction being created here, so that's going to trigger a mechanical royalty, right? Going down the list, ringtones. You know, like the ones that you download from like Verizon or Sprint, you put on your phone. There again is a reproduction, so that's going to trigger a mechanical royalty, right? Moving down the list, interactive streaming, such as actually like Spotify, where your music actually downloads onto a server, right? There's a reproduction involved, so you get a mechanical royalty, and then when it performs, you get a performance royalty, right? Moving right down the list to non-interactive streaming, and that is where you can't really interact with it. It's pretty much web radio, right? And that is going to trigger a performance royalty because it is performing, right? Moving on to video streaming, such as when your music is in YouTube videos, right? There is a synchronization royalty that's involved because it's music with visual images, and also when it performs, there is a performance royalty, right? Moving on, let's talk about sheet music that you can actually download from websites, right? What kind of royalty is involved there? A print royalty, okay? Moving on, lyric websites such as Rap Genius that you can go on and you can actually look up the lyrics. Print royalty, right? And how about those apps where you can actually sing into the app because you want to figure out what is that song, and then it tells you what the song is. A print royalty, right? So you see how this works? Now there's also something called Planet Uranus royalties. What's that? That's out of the world royalty that doesn't even exist yet. Everyone freaks out when a new technology comes out. They wonder, oh my God, what kind of payment should it get? And I use something called the Gillis technique. And Gillis is a friend of ours, Neil Gillis. He's actually the president of Round Hill Music Publishing. Right. Great guy, and he actually sums it up as this. Every time a new technology comes out, people freak out and scramble trying to figure out, what it is. But if you just use these core essentials that we've been talking about in this course, it's actually easy to understand. Number one, is there some sort of reproduction? If so, a mechanical. Yep. Is there something being performed? If so, a performance royalty. Is there some sort of audiovisual component? If so, a sync royalty. And is there a lyric reprint? If so, a print royalty. See how easy that is, right? Now, I know things get a little bit more complicated, especially when we talk about the actual, amounts that people are going to get. Everyone's been freaking out over years about the little fractions of pennies they get for streaming and all that kind of stuff. So break it down for us with regard to, what the, sort of the artist, writer, publisher is going to get for these different uses.
All right, so, we were talking about mechanicals in an earlier segment, and, those, we were really focusing on physical mechanicals and with the controlled composition clause. But, when you're in the digital world, the digital download, it is a reproduction, it is a mechanical, it is subject to that existing statutory rate that we have, the 9.1 cents for a song, 5 minutes or less, or the 1.75 cents per minute if it's over 5 minutes. But the great thing in this digital space is there is no longer that beast that we talked about. No more controlled compositions. You always get the full rate, and that's a fantastic thing. iTunes I think it was announced recently that maybe in around 2019, 2020, that iTunes may get rid of the download store entirely. So much as we've seen CDs decline, we have been seeing a decline in the digital downloads, or you'll see the term DPD associated with those as well. I think they're always going to be around to some degree, much like I don't feel physical is going to totally disappear, but it's certainly a far more smaller percentage, that is, of what the income is. Ringtones. You were mentioning Verizon and Sprint. We have ringtones. Those are set by the similar statutory provisions that are out, but instead of 9.1, it's 24 cents for a ringtone. Now, you may also hear of ringbacks, which are different than ringtones. Those are negotiable. It's not set by that statutory rate. So, you can typically even negotiate a percentage of what the retail price is for that. Now, I'll do non-interactive streaming first, because it's kind of the easier one, and that is non-interactive, again, being the internet radio. You can't manipulate or choose the song. It's being pre-programmed for you. It only involves a performance, but it still can add up significantly. SiriusXM, Pandora, the two biggest sort of cases. But the more interesting one and the more topical of late is interactive streaming. So, for the last few years, we have been under the existing statutory terms, which were, and they're very complicated. There's all these different types of ways, but the main area that we all focus on as listeners in the interactive streaming world is Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon has their new service. That historically, up to literally 2 months ago, has been at 10.5% of the income taken in by that service. But that 10.5% royalty has to be split between a mechanical and a performance. And generally speaking, it has been 50-50, 50% to the mechanical, 50% to the performance. But all these statutory rates that exist in the United States are all determined by what is called the CRB, the Copyright Royalty Board. And every 5 years, we go through a hearing process with the CRB where both sides, present their case as to why, and of course, why the rates in our case as songwriters and publishers need to be increased. And of course, the digital service providers and record labels are always trying to give arguments as to why the rates need to be decreased. But, last year it was an intense fight in front of the Copyright Royalty Board, and songwriters and publishers waged, a very expensive and really powerful fight against DEMA, the Digital Media Association, and a lot of these, the 5 main players: Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, and whoever I just missed. There's typically 5. Anyways, they literally just announced a month and a half ago that over the next 5 years, our current 10.5% rate is going to get increased to 15.1% incrementally over the next 5 years. So that really is a fantastic outcome for songwriters and publishers, where over these next 5 years, our rates are going to go up by 50%. Now, I'm sure, generally speaking, the ratio of 50% to mechanical, 50% to performance will probably stay intact. We'll see how that all goes. But I mean, this is a huge victory for songwriters and publishers, and one that we should all be really excited about, because streaming is increasing exponentially every single year. We're just continuing to hear about, of course, Spotify, its IPO, and, the battle between Spotify and Apple Music as to who has how many millions of paid subscribers. I mean, let's just hope that this battle continues, because the more people that get used to paying $10 a month for music only benefits all the rest of us in the music space. Now, I should mention on a quick side note, as we've done every now and again in these segments for masters, on the non-interactive streaming front, it is the significant source of income for masters through SoundExchange, because that's why SoundExchange exists. And just at the end of last year, 2017, the CRB, Copyright Royalty Board, awarded SoundExchange with a 40% increase in their rate. So, master owners, performers, both featured and sidemen, this is all a great thing, and let's hope that this kind of progress continues for years to come, because we have historically been paid at very low rates. And this is a positive move, but we all continue to need to push it up to where it needs to be. Now let's touch upon quickly video streaming. YouTube essentially is usually the biggest one that gets singled out. It's been an interesting battle with Google because technically, in a way, they've been infringing on all of our copyrights for years. Users just generate their own videos, they upload them, they're using masters, and Google could technically be in huge amounts of lawsuits and fights. But the industry generally just decided to say, okay, look, YouTube, we will kind of embrace this, we will allow this to continue, but how we're going to compromise on this is that you need to share your advertising revenue with us. So generally now how it works is, 50% of the ad revenue stays with Google on YouTube, and as long as you as a rights holder has opted in and allowed your music to be monetized or the videos in which they appear to be monetized, the remaining 50% is split between the publishing side and the master side. When both copyrights are in use right now, it's generally been 15% to the songwriters and publishers and 35% to the master owners. But there are a lot of very high volume monetized videos where there isn't a master recording involved. It's just Joe Schmo or whatever that just goes in and is done his own recording, or maybe he's singing a cappella a song, and those, in that case, the entire 50% goes to the songwriter and the publisher. So, these videos, I think Gangnam Style is still like probably the all-time biggest video, however many, I know it's over 1 billion, I forget the actual number, but I mean, when you get to that kind of a level, we're talking significant, sort of amounts of income. We had ended the last section, I had a brief mention about, sheet music and print and the digital, and, just as print has been a smaller percentage, with sites like Music Notes, you mentioned Rap Genius on the lyric reprint side. There's a company called Lyric Find that has been helping publishers monetize their lyrics, and then using their license, they have been enabling other sites to use lyrics to be monetized. So really, lyric income has been on the rise, which is fantastic because we normally haven't had that. And in those situations for downloads, whereas in the physical world, say for sheet music, we would get that 10 to 20% of the retail selling price. In the digital world, the publisher is getting half of that, and the writer is also getting their increase as well, where maybe they got the 10 to 12 cents, they're now getting 25 cents for those sheet music downloads. And again, the lyric websites that I just mentioned is also usually a split of the ad revenue like YouTube. So in your planet, your Uranus world, who knows, but I think if we go down that checklist of things that Neil conveniently provided for us, and then figure out how that service or some new technology is going to monetize, we'll all be able to work together as a way to figure out, all right, well, this is how you need to pay me, whether it's a fixed penny rate or a percentage, and it incorporates all these rights, and let's embrace the new technology, because who knows what's going to be popular 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now.
I mean, something new has got to happen, right? I mean, if you just think of the history of it all, I literally have seen, everything from vinyl to then like 8-track to cassette to CD to MP3 to streaming. I mean, is it just going to stop there? I mean, it's going to go somewhere.
Well, and look, even just this year here in 2018, how many years has Facebook been around? It is only until this year that finally Facebook is engaging in conversations with the record labels and with us publishers. We finally have a deal on the table that we're all considering to be opting into, where we can finally get paid for the use of our music on Facebook. And then, Instagram hopefully will be next, and Snapchat, and whatever other service 2 years from now is going to be the next hot thing. Who knows?
Right? And what's also interesting from a marketing perspective too is thinking about the adoption rate of the consumer as well. Back in 1989, and it was more like, I beg your pardon, 1998. Literally, I was going to these group musics, these think tanks where people were talking about like streaming. Streaming is gonna be the thing. And here we are 20 years later rather, and it's just kind of starting to like really take off. I mean, So quite interesting how consumers are, in terms of
It's a fascinating consumer behavior thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a whole separate class.
Yeah, absolutely, exactly. So what we want to do now is we want to end with our question. So what is that big question going to be for this segment? And here goes something for you guys. So a lot of you watching, want to get your music, streamed, on Spotify, let's just say, for example. So what I want you guys to do is I want you to do some homework. How can you get, and what is the best way, or what are some of the methods of getting on Spotify playlists? Okay, because that's an important and very helpful way to actually market your music. So do the research. We're trying to break down the basics for you guys so that this stuff sticks. I think we got one more type of income stream, and we're going to talk about foreign sub-publishing next. Hang in there. We'll be back.